What's going on, Fantasy Alarm family? Justin Fensterman back with you with another Fantasy Football Stock Watch report. After Week 2's Fantasy Football action, let's talk about some of the players who are on the rise and some who are falling when it comes to interest and fantasy football production potential. Let's get to the players. First on the rise, Tyson Williams. When J.K. Dobbins and Gus Edwards hurt themselves and were deemed out for the year, the Ravens did sign a few running backs for depth purposes, but they never traded for one, showing that they had confidence in Williams. After rushing for 65 yards against the Raiders and catching a few passes, investors were still a bit concerned after Week 1 because most of his yardage was compiled on a 35-yard touchdown run, and that Latavius Murray received more carries than him in Week 1 and was able to score a touchdown as well. In his past matchup against the Chiefs, we saw Williams get more carries than Murray. In both weeks, Williams has outsnapped Murray, and despite Murray rushing in another score this week and Lamar Jackson running the ball 16 times himself, Williams showed a lot of success on the ground, running for an impressive 77 yards and 5.9 yards per carry. The Ravens' next opponent is Detroit, who allowed Elijah Mitchell to run for 104 yards on them. This bodes well for Williams. Up next on the rise, Cortland Sutton. Jerry Jeudy is sidelined, and there are plenty of open targets to go around, and Sutton, who was targeted just 3 times in the Broncos opener, received 12 against the Jaguars in Week 2. He caught 9 of those 12 targets for 159 yards and has the Jets up next. What a good matchup. Jeudy could be missing another 4 to 5 games, and that is great for Sutton. He's on the field for at least 3/4 of the offensive plays, and even though it's been 2 games, and we still have the Lions and Packers to play in Monday Night Football, Teddy Bridgewater has the second highest completion percentage of any quarterback at 77. Final player on the rise, James White. After 2 games, White has more points in PPR leagues than any other Patriot. While White can't be relied on to get many carries, he currently has the second most targets on the Pats behind Jacoby Myers. White did rush in a score in Week 2, but it will clearly be the receptions that will provide most of his production, and so far he's caught 6 passes per game. Damian Harris is far and away the top dog when it comes to the Patriots' run game, but White was on the field more than Harris, being present for half of the Patriots' offensive plays in Week 2, and he definitely has flex appeal heading into Week 3. Now some players who are falling in our eyes. Mike Davis. Going into the season, fantasy investors saw Davis as the only running back in Atlanta and thought that presented a safe enough floor to draft him in the 5th or 6th round in 12-team leagues. With Atlanta expected to be playing from behind a lot this year, that will likely deplete Davis's carries throughout the season. Another issue that has presented itself is that Davis is actually not the only running back option in the Falcons' backfield, as gadget guy Cordero Patterson has been utilized both on the ground and in the air. Davis received 7 targets and Patterson received 6. Patterson scored twice versus Tampa in Week 2, and while Davis should continue getting more carries than Patterson, at least for now, Patterson will pose a threat to Davis's reception total and overall production throughout the year. Up next, taking a nosedive, James Conner. Despite Conner receiving more carries in 2 weeks than RB mate Chase Edmonds, Edmonds definitely has the higher production ceiling and was on the field more than Conner in both of the Cardinals games this year. Conner played in 49% of the Cardinals' offensive snaps in Week 1, and that dropped to 39% in Week 2. Going into the season, Edmonds wasn't viewed as much of a red zone threat, and Conner investors thought touchdowns would be his for the taking inside that 10-yard line. But in 2 games, he's rushed for 3.3 yards per carry. Yuck! Edmonds is clearly the prioritized running back, and Conner has become too dangerous to even flex despite the Jaguars being next up for the Cardinals. Final faller, Marquez Callaway. The preseason darling of the Saints skyrocketed up draft boards, and by the end of draft season, he was being drafted as a top 100 fantasy football draft pick, and the guy has been targeted just 6 times through 2 games. Remember, no Traquan Smith or, Michael Thomas being there, and that should raise his production ceiling, but Jameis Winston hasn't been throwing the ball. Of all the quarterbacks who have played in 2 full games, Winston has thrown the fewest number of passes at 42 of any quarterback, and that will directly impact Callaway. The Patriots being up for the Saints next also doesn't help matters. from what we've seen from this Saints offense thus far, we can't start Callaway in our lineups. And the more time that passes without him being able to show what he can do on the field, the closer it gets to the return of Michael Thomas, putting Callaway in a major competition for targets down the stretch. That was another FA Stock Watch report for Fantasy Football FA Nation. Get in to win and make sure you're keeping up to date with all of our content on fantasyalarm.com. Remember, no rest for the winners. Good luck in week 3.